Hey, this is Brian Stillman with BeTerrific. Welcome back. Our continuing coverage of NAB 2019 here in New York City at the Jacob Javits Convention Center. This is a thrill. If you're tuning in for this one, you are lucky because I'm super excited about this. We're here with Bill Hanley. He is a pioneer of sound engineering, pioneer of live sound, concert sound. He's a legend, and I get to talk to him. You get to hear this conversation. This is going to be awesome. Bill, thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome. Great to be here.
Now, you have worked, we're going to touch on a couple of highlights. You've worked so many big shows, so many concerts over the years. Before we get into a little of the history, I want to just say, you worked on Woodstock. You were brought in to handle Woodstock. The original
Correct.
Woodstock, not the reissues of Woodstock, not the fake Woodstocks. Woodstock.
Correct.
Tell me, how'd that happen, and what was that like?
Well, it was pretty wild.
Right.
I had done stuff with Miami Pop, and Michael saw my work there, and Stan Goldstein had saw my work. He worked for a recording studio down there, and then he called me up asking me how to do the job, and I wouldn't tell him anything. If he wanted me to do the job, I'll do the job and take care of it.
Did you have any idea what you were getting into?
Not
with
that
show?
big, no idea. 100,000 people, I was told. I could deal with that, yes.
But also all the technical difficulties, the rain, the stage that's partially collapsing.
It's my work. My work is to make the stage never collapsed.
Yeah, it started to go. They were worried about it collapsing.
That's BS. That was to get the kids off the stands.
Oh, okay.
Because they were standing up in front of the people blocking the sight lines up. So they invented that story.
Oh, okay.
Everything was solid. Rock solid scaffolding.
Was it difficult to handle sound for something that ended up being that big and outdoors and everything else that was going on? How'd you approach it? How'd you tackle that job?
Well, I had been doing sound outside and outdoors with George Wein at Newport since 1957.
Okay.
And worked my way into it and studied the problems, and my work was to make it happen well out there. And that's where I'm coming from.
Right.
I just had to have a lot more equipment and had to do some specialty stuff to get the sound back, so I built special speakers that would narrow dispersion and get that energy out to the listening ears.
So you were bringing in your own equipment. It's not like today where the house rents whatever they're going to rent, and
nobody had any of that big equipment that was really good. I lucked out because all the movie theaters went out of business at the time after when the World War II was over.
Right.
And the television came in, all the electrical engineers went into that.
Right.
And then I bought up some of the sound equipment that was in the theaters.
So you're bringing movie theater sound equipment to use for concert sound.
Stuff, right.
Wow.
AT&T and Bell Laboratories stuff.
Wow. Now, with Woodstock, I mean, one of the things, it sounded great. You know, I mean, anyone who was there, I mean, you know, nobody's ever complained about the sound at Woodstock. Were there any challenges that cropped up throughout the weekend, throughout the show, that you had to sort of tackle and fix and overcome that you didn't expect?
Well, we built a new console. We were building a great big console, a 50-input console, but it never quite got finished, and we used that for the recording console. Right. And then for the house, I built a cheapy console to put in there, but it had parasitic oscillation problems. So I couldn't get that fixed, so I punted and brought in Alltech and some Shure stuff and some RCA, a little bit of what would do the job. We had them all padded out so they couldn't overdrive them.
Right.
And that's what we used.
Now you mentioned the board, you know, you had live sound, you had recording. You were one of the pioneers dealing with concert situations where you're both doing live sound and have a recording set up so you can capture the sound. Talk a little bit about that. How'd that come about? Not necessarily Woodstock, just in general.
It came about in general because when people are recording, they just think about that. They pay attention to the recording and don't pay attention to the audience. The normal people doing churches and factories weren't into making it happen well audio-wise, you know, to any extent.
Right.
And we were the first people really to make that our principal work, to make it happen.
When you made that decision, when you said, okay, we're going to focus on this, what were the details that you were thinking about to make that a success? Like, what were you saying, this is what we need to accomplish to make it work?
Well, the first thing I tried, I went up and I designed the security wall system around the stage. That big green area that was empty if you look down from the sky shots of it, so that people can get in and out, because I had experienced a lot of problems at Newport with people crowding around and other smaller festivals around the stage and not having egress.
Okay.
And then we forced the stage to be tall enough so that they would, if they got too close, they can't see. So they back up, and that's how, that's the part of it. Now the other part of it is to have special speakers that would be narrow dispersion that I could reach the back of the audience.
Okay.
Which we're supposed to be that far back.
Right. Well, you say, you know,
100,000.
Yeah, one of the reasons we're talking today is you're the subject of a new book coming out called The Last Seat in the House.
Correct.
Which refers to the idea that you have to make it sound good to the person sitting in the last seat in the house, all the way in the back.
That was my idea, and that was the design of everything I did around sound. I put the control for the audio out in the audience. Nobody was doing that. They were doing it from backstage or way back of the house, and you can't keep control of everything if you do that. You got to be able to see what the performer is doing if you don't know the performer, and you have to sit so you can see all that and still hear your sound system and hear a little bit from the stage, so you know the music to do the balancing of it. And that's what was our method of, you know, and having people that were familiar with the music, because we were doing a lot of people in the houses in the village and around the city and at Newport for the Jazz Festival.
Now, we talk about you as a pioneer. One of the things that you did, you were, before you, it was the house would hire whoever their local sound guy was.
They would normally have a house sound system in there.
Right. And you though, what changed with you is you would come in with the equipment and do the sound.
Everything.
Were they immediately receptive to that idea?
They didn't want to spend the money. No.
Yeah, why spend the money on quality?
Right. Why should you bother with that? The promoter didn't want to see his money go out the door with somebody else beside the group.
They'd rather just have the guy that they're already paying. But the problem is, when you're bringing in a band, that's a specialized situation.
They had the electrician run it. I spent a lot of time at Boston
the electrician.
Gardens, and he doesn't know anything about music. They mixed the show from underneath the grandstand in a window that was 2 foot square.
Can't tell what's going on.
That's right, he couldn't hear. But and the crowd noise level and all that stuff that was going on. It was terrible.
How'd you convince them that they need you?
I didn't convince them. George Wein allowed me to get a chance to, because then the quality of music started to get more important.
Okay. Who is George?
George Wein is the promoter. George Wein was the promoter of Newport Jazz and folk festivals. He was brought in a consultant to the Laurelard family that put the money up for it. Laurelard and his wife.
And he decided he wanted you.
He decided, well, it came about because the guy from New York really didn't care much about it either. Right. He was charging big bucks, and I walked in to see what was going on because my father's friend told me that they were having a lot of problems with audio and that I should find out. So I went hopping after George, and well, we got it all straightened out now. So I went down there to see how he was straightening it out. And the next thing you know, I'm behind the console in a little room that's 8 foot square, running the sound system. And he was off socializing. He didn't get like the normal sound guy who was doing Playboy clubs and stuff in the city. And the what's the place out in Long Island, Brooklyn?
I don't even know.
Oh yeah, it's the tennis courts. The first one. Now there's the big one.
We'll figure it out. We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
But here's my question.
So therefore, that's how I...
Well, that's how you got into the fields. But how do you convince the other... I mean, okay, so Newport wants to use you. They're fine using you. How do you convince all the little clubs, though, that they shouldn't use their house guy, that they should bring you in?
Howard Solomon called me from the Cafe at Go-Go.
Okay.
And he was across the street on Bleecker Street.
Yeah.
And Freddie Weintraub, who was one of the bitter end, and he asked me to do the sound for him.
Those are both big clubs down in the village in New York City on Bleecker Street.
Right, and then the scene for Steve Paul, and I was...
So you're building up a reputation.
Right, I wanted to get into the Roseland Ballroom and try to give them high quality sound for the big bands.
Right.
Because they were just using one microphone, and that was it.
As it just the one mic was
Right.
hanging above the band, that kind of thing? Or?
For two big bands, Latin band and a straight band. And they wouldn't have anything to do with me. Never could get them to do it.
So tell me, how'd you get involved with the book? How'd that happen?
John, who wrote the book, got told about me by the lady and her husband.
John Kane.
Yes, John Kane. And the lady and her husband, what's his name? He ended up buying the farm, Max's farm, after he died.
Okay, yeah.
And what was the question was?
I'm just curious, how did he approach you to write a book about you? Was this something you two came up with together?
I can't think of his name at the moment. But he went down there and he was talking to her about it, and his wife, and it'll hit me when we're all through, I'm sure. She told him about me. Because I had been talking to her husband about stuff, and after the festival was over, and that's how we began writing the book about me. He came to Boston. He lived in Somerville, and I lived in Medford at the time.
Okay, yep.
And that's where he started from, and did a doctorate on my whole life.
Did you expect anyone would have done doctorates about you or want to write books about you? I mean, did you
No. I knew I was a pioneer, but I did not understand that, no.
Looking at how it's all changed since then, I mean, now everyone brings in a sound guy, an engineer, everyone brings in new equipment, all the stuff that you started off doing. Is it gratifying to know that you sort of paved this way, that you set the bar for sound?
Well, it does set a bar for it, but it still takes people in understanding what's going to happen and how to avoid trouble with the sound system not working and not having people facing the right speakers so they can hear questions when they're asked from the audience. I ended up doing Johnson's inauguration and the Philadelphia Folk Festival for 20 years, and that was
You were there when Dylan went electric.
That's right, at Newport. And had no idea that he was going to play distortion. And when you worry about it, well, you got to worry about it because when you're outdoors, it's very easy to blow out these loudspeakers. And the first clue is getting some kind of distortion. Now, if you hear the distortion coming from the musician to the microphone, to the sound system, what's too loud? How do you tell when you're outside and the sound just dissipates to make sure that everything runs smoothly and it doesn't blow up? Because when sound systems go outside, usually the speakers dissolve and turn into snowflakes.
Wow. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us in the booth, and thank you for all the years of excellent sound.
You're welcome.
And all
we try harder, group.
We appreciate it. Bill Hanley, I'm Brian Stillman. The book that's coming out, The Last Seat in the House by John Kane. Is it out yet?
No, it won't be out for 2 more months.
2 months.
It's a 650-page book.
650 pages, which probably only scratches the surface of this man's career and what this man has brought to live sound and the music that we love. Thank you again for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm Brian Stillman. I'm here with BeTerrific, BeTerrific.com, bringing you continuing coverage from NAB New York 2019 here in New York City at the Jacob Javits Convention Center. Don't forget to check out BeTerrific Tech, where you can look at our Agility Quadricep panels. They are LED panels. They're flexible. They're light. They're magnetic. They stick to any surface, any metal surface. It's a great way to do your imaging and do your imaging surfaces moving forward. Stick around. We'll have more for you soon.